Welcome to Fire Mountain with special guest coming all the way in from an undisclosed location, bringing him in. It is.
Oh yeah, in the bedroom episode.
in the bedroom episode, just so that everybody can see. Dom's in his bedroom. I'm in my bedroom. We thought, hey, let's bring Fire Mountain 47 from the bedroom. How are you?
We've got to do it. Yeah, I mean, I'm away obviously this week. I'm in Qatar, so watching the game. Championing all of our Western ideals on the ground here in this oppressive nation.
Actually, right now, you'd fit in really well in Qatar.
Well,
super well.
Yeah, well, I don't know, because the world is hating on Qatar right now. But
it's true.
Watching it, about 10% of the chat is football, 90% is
crazy.
Politics and culture. It's just like, what?
Dude, that it is crazy. So, obviously, England, fresh off 6-2 win.
Yeah, so today, obviously, when we're recording this,
which is Sunday evening, because we want to keep that illusion going.
Right, obviously. But just imagine that we've just witnessed England do one of their best opening games of a campaign ever, 6-2 against Iran, the great footballing nation of Iran. Yeah, I even got text from Phil Coleman, literally, as I was watching it, and he was saying, "This is the year." He gets sucker punched every time he does, because literally we get a goal on the board and Phil thinks it's coming home again.
It's coming home. He starts playing the music. He starts dancing. Yeah. Oh, that's funny.
It's pretty right. Jamie, I was watching. So I'm in Warsaw at the moment. I was preaching at a church yesterday, and with the pastor from there, Jamie Clay, who's a Midlander, and he was like, when we were scoring, it was like, "Oh no, mate, this is the year, mate. This is great. We're gonna do it this year, Dom. I promise you, this is gonna be it, right?" And then as soon as Iran scored one goal and it was 4-1, he was like, "Sack Gareth Southgate." literally, he was like, sack him. So I feel like embodied between Phil and Jamie, you've got the human condition, this knife edge of flippant fickleness. Like, it is what it is. But hey, but yeah, the Qatar thing, pretty crazy, pretty wild, isn't it? It's just like...
It is. I just don't think that it feels like sport should be sport and let political issues be political issues. When they start to cross over, it just gets weird, man. It gets too weird.
I think there was nothing like this when it was the 2008 Beijing Olympics. There was no like sort of agenda to undermine the Olympics. Like yesterday at the opening ceremony, did you know BBC didn't even show it? BBC didn't even show the opening ceremony, almost like to champion the cause of LGBTQ and human rights. And like people who are capitalizing off this decision to be in Qatar, yet the BBC have got all of their pundits in 5-star hotels living it up in Doha. It's just hypocrisy to the nth degree. Now, obviously, and I'm on a bit of a soapbox here. Obviously,
this is very unlucky on Fire Mountain.
Well, I'm not condoning obviously working because I'm not on the ground there. Yeah. But I think that most of us are struggling to understand that most of the developing world works like this.
Yeah,
there isn't a version of where people will go and by our standards work for a very small rate of pay and send all the money back to their family in a different country. That's actually quite common in the developing world. Now, I'm not expressing any judgment on whether that's right or wrong, but all I'm saying is like the reason that we have World Cups in different places is to try and bring a bit of solidarity and to try and share our cultures and try to help understanding. So we put it in challenging nations. We've done that historically. Like when Hitler was the Chancellor of Germany, we had the Olympics in Berlin. Like we've had the Olympics in Beijing in 2008. Like so I don't know. I think if we can only host these things in countries that we totally agree with, then we can only have it in like America and England ultimately. And who's to say that
not even there, because and all share views even across England.
That's
true.
I
think that the crazy thing for me in the whole thing is if you listen to what that minister said, the guy who basically stuffed up the whole of the World Cup for Qatar, He said, "This is our culture. It's what we believe. We're not asking you to believe it. We're asking you to respect it."
Yes.
And I feel like my mind is blown because for guys who would talk about, cultural misappropriation and people are doing this, people are doing that, all of a sudden it's like, well, no, we'll absolutely disrespect your culture.
Yeah.
We may not agree with it and people may not agree, but I find it a surreal thing that it's ended up becoming this thing of like, no, you need to adopt our values and promote what we want to. And I'm like, it feels like the same argument they would make on one side, they've just lost on the other side. Because I'm going, it's in their country. If it's what they believe, it's what they believe. The same as if it's in China and we've all agreed, well, we're going to go to China. The best protest is for the football players themselves to say, we don't want to be associated with that, so we won't play for the cup. We won't play for England.
Yes.
Great. That's their choice.
Yeah.
I don't know about this whole, we're going to go to your country, but we're going to really try and kind of fully.
Well, this is the thing as well. So like, obviously you've got all of these questionable decisions, and I don't like the fact it's in Qatar, but to be honest, largely because it's Christmas, it's the wrong time of year for the World Cup.
Yeah.
Right. And it's not a footballing nation, which means they didn't have the infrastructure. So they've only built this infrastructure to accommodate this World Cup, which isn't a great use of money.
No.
But ultimately, it is what it is. And the thing that annoys me is watching Gary Lineker espouse views on something that just talk about football. Just talk about football. So I think some of this is media propagated in the sense that, like, they yesterday I watched kind of the opening day, but they didn't show the opening ceremony, which made me annoyed. Right, because I'm thinking this is ridiculous. Why do you get to make that virtue signaling choice? Like, you're going to show all the games that you profit from, but the opening ceremony, oh no, right? But like, it's like for about a solid 40 minutes, the whole panel were talking about the human rights issues and the LGBTQ oppression, right, in Qatar, and then had the nerve to say at the end of this whole spiel, right? And like, why do you think it, he said to one of the panel guests, he's like, and why do you think it doesn't feel like a normal run up to the World Cup? And I'm like, because of all of what you've just done. So, normally it's getting people G'd up for the World Cup, but like instead it's just like, I don't know, it's challenging, but like, we don't want to talk about the World Cup the whole time, but it definitely, I think, exposes some of our hypocrisy and, I don't know. I just think, just show football, please. Talk about football. Talk about what you know about. But then people could make the same claims about us. So maybe we should move on to stop talking about what you don't know about. And so obviously,
if we stop talking about what we don't know about, we literally, there's no point to what we do here. There's no point. We are talking about nothing.
Well, I've got something I want to talk about today. Right?
Okay, go.
Because obviously, every time England win one game, it's like, it's coming home. In fact, I FaceTimed Caleb after the game and he started singing that down the phone, right? So even Caleb, as an 11-year-old Brit now, English boy, is already learning the heartache of following the nation through miry trials, right? But obviously, here's a tenuous link. It's coming home. This will be coming. You're going to be talking about Jesus coming back.
I am. And you've given me a great title for that. You give me a great title for that one.
Go on.
I'm going, but Jesus is coming back.
Are you going to run with that title?
Oh, yeah, dude. It's a great title.
What are you going to do when you leave, like, this area? Are you just going to... Because who are you going to tap up for titles?
Oh, no, that's why we've got this going on. As long as you're in a bedroom somewhere, I know I can get access.
You're going to have to be careful how you say that, Richard.
Well... take it however you want to, but I'm just saying, let's keep the romance alive. Wait, what?
Keep the bromance alive. Okay, so on Sunday, you're talking about Jesus coming back, right? Yeah. So let me just set the context for these talks. I asked you to speak on 2 messages as your kind of outgoing wisdom to the Sunny Hill Church, and you pulled a curveball on me because for years you've always been quite practical in your preaching approach and high application and quite motivational in terms of changing your life through habit and disciplines. And you decided for your last 2, you want to speak on some doctrinal matters.
Yeah. Because
so last week, go on.
So last week, Trinity, which was really, really interesting.
Yeah.
Good, kind of really good session. And kind of used the Nicene Creed as my jump in in terms of why is it that the early church fathers thought this creed, which is interesting because the actual word for creed is a Greek word for symbol.
Okay.
Which is basically meaning that you take half of something that's broken and you put it together with another half. What are you doing right now? Yes, please.
Dude, I'm in Qatar. It's boiling.
It's boiling. You bring them together, and then this creates an identity for the bearer of the symbol. So that's the word for creed. So the creed is bringing kind of connected things together to make one piece that's actually the identity of the person bearing it. So why is it that the early church fathers, when they were writing up a creed, to basically go, if you're a normal Christian, this is what you should hold to, chose the Trinity and this idea of Christ coming back? I was just intrigued by it. And the more I sit on it, the more I'm beginning to go, it's pretty clever. They're pretty clever.
Can I ask you a question before you continue? I wasn't there at Sunny Hill on Sunday when you preached this message. Did you use the creed? Did you put it on the screen?
So I didn't at the end, and looking back, I think maybe I should have, but I did read out the creed at the end of my preach. For the land. It was really interesting because I had a lady come up to me who's from an Anglican church who was visiting family and so decided to come to Sunny Hill. And every week they recite the creed in her church. So that she comes from a very strong evangelical church, but they cite the creed. So she was all over it.
What, as in their actual corporate act of worship, they just start. And what comes on the screen and everyone just says it like almost.
And everyone says it like a liturgy, nearly.
Wow. Okay.
And so every week they and I thought, oh, that's interesting. I said, I don't know if I'd ever do that because I feel like it loses something potentially. But there is something interesting about every now and again just dragging through and going, actually, here is kind of core to what we believe. So I think that the Trinity becomes a frame to go, if you don't hold to this mystery, this affirmation of faith of who God is as he defines himself rather than what we define him as, we end up losing various aspects that are really important to how God is God. And then I think that kind of piggybacks into this idea of going, okay, now how do you live your life off this affirmation? Well, Christ is coming back. So this should begin to be the push on how you begin to live your life, like a life of expectancy. So it's interesting. So I think that most of us don't believe that Jesus will come back in our lifetime. And so opening questions on this, do you think in your lifetime Christ will return?
Well, I'm looking at the creed now, right? Yeah. Okay. The Apostles' Creed and the Nicene Creed, the same thing?
No. The Apostles' Creed is different to the Nicene Creed.
What's the difference there?
Well, name. One's Apostle, one's Nicene. I don't know. I haven't looked at the Apostles' Creed. I just know they're different.
Okay, fair enough. Oh, well, let's not pick at a scab that we don't have any understanding of. Okay, let's not pick at that. Right. I guess, like, obviously, the creed is instituted, like you say, like the early church fathers, in order to create a consistent thread of belief and understanding across the developing church around the world. Because, you know, as we've found at times, running two sites as a church can be a challenge in terms of staying consistent and true to our goals and vision. You know, when you are planting churches fast and establishing elders, you need a point of belief, don't you, that holds you together. And a sense of understanding, right? And on the Nicene Creed is the one you're referring to, yeah?
Yeah, so the Nicene Creed, which was around 385, somewhere around over there.
Okay. So this is when the early church then was moving from a persecuted state to an officialized Roman Catholic.
And what was happening is that there were other doctrinal issues beginning to creep in that was affecting how it's hard for us to picture where at the time there was one church. It was a universal church. There wasn't multiple denominations. Like we can't picture this. So it was beginning to affect how the universal church was viewing what they felt were like central issues for faith. And I think that that's the profound thing about it is I think there's certain things we would look at and go, I think that this is a secondary issue, but it feels like for the early church fathers, they were going, no, actually, how you see God is a central issue. This is a primary issue. How you view Christ coming again, these are primary issues of faith, and we need to create a way that people will understand fully what we're talking about, what we believe, and also a way that lets us look and go, this is how we're creating these protections around the people of God. And it's fascinating because I don't think we would run down those two as these two central pivot points of the faith. Yet for some reason, the church fathers are going, here are two central pivot points of protection that we need to hold to. And that kind of fascinated me. That line of thinking just fascinated me when I started to unpick everything.
I mean, your initial question to me is, do I believe that Jesus will come back in my lifetime?
Yeah.
I think it's hard, isn't it? Because I think all the environment is suggesting how much worse can this get, really, in terms of things going to chaos. Yeah. But I also guess I kind of feel like the disciples in Jesus' day, after he had ascended to the right hand of the Father, thought that they would see him come back in their lifetime. Yeah. So I don't know if in me there's just this inbuilt, there's a lip service and a head nod that Jesus is coming back, but not a deep-seated. I mean, I've got to say this really carefully. Maybe even like desire, like because in Western life, it's a pretty cushy arrangement, isn't it? It's pretty good.
Yeah.
Even though things are bad, it's not like early church bad for us. We're not experienced being torched. We're not experienced being imprisoned, particularly in the West. Like, I imagine Christians in North Korea might answer very differently to me, who's currently being in persecution to the extent that I have to stay in Warsaw for 3 days.
Hard times.
But like, so I think that there's a chance it could come back, but probably built in me, I just think I don't think about it. I'm just like, in his time, he'll do it.
So now what's weird is I have the same run as you, is I think, do I believe that Jesus will come back in my lifetime? I don't. Like, worryingly for me now, I think, why don't I believe that? And what would look different in my life if I did actually believe he was coming back in our lifetime? So at some point in church history, there was a shift where even when you look around, like the early churches used to build perishable churches. There was this inbuilt idea of these churches don't need to last. We don't need cathedrals. What we need is churches for the temporary, because Christ is coming back. So, like, why would we? At some point, it shifted to cathedrals. Now, I think cathedrals are amazing. They're designed to bring you to awe and wonder and draw your eye up, and I don't think there's anything evil about it. But something happens, and I'm not too sure what that something is, but we began to just slowly go, we're not expecting the return in our lifetime. And then I think we're at a point now where we're starting to look and go, well, these are the 10 things that need to happen before Christ will return, as if we could now dictate or know whether or not Jesus was coming back, even though the Bible says we can't. But I don't even think that Christ will probably come in my kid's lifetime. And that's really scary. And I was speaking about this with Shemaine, and she was saying, I don't know if I want Jesus to come back in my lifetime.
Well, you said that.
Shemaine said it, and her reason was,
she's a bit more vegan then.
Yeah, she's pagan like you don't know, and she was all, but not us. We're really holy, but
we would never say that. We might think it, but we wouldn't say it.
We wouldn't say it out loud. You're not foolish enough to just say things that will get us into trouble. Hold on.
Oh no, not us.
So she was looking and going, I want to see my kids grow up. I want to see my kids get married. I want to see life unfold. And so, like,
Louise said something similar, and she said, I want to see my husband grow up.
Nah, she didn't say that. She got married, and I think wasn't it the next day that she started her fervent prayer and fasting for the return of Christ?
Okay, well, let me ask you a question then, Mike. There's a button in front of you, right in front of you.
Yeah.
And if you press the button, Jesus comes back right now.
Yeah.
What are you doing? Are you pressing it?
You don't know, dude. This could be actually happening.
Okay.
I should have just stayed off. The rapture's happening. You just left on the broadcast.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I don't know if you went. I think it would be like what like the opposite of the rapture.
If the rapture,
I don't know what the opposite would be.
What's the opposite of rapid?
I don't know how to say this to you, but you wouldn't be my barometer to find out.
I'm not the one. What I've done is I've constructed a narrative. So if the rapture happened and everyone's gone, here's my line. Jesus told me he's left me behind to just look after the church while he's taken everyone else. You got to have a plan.
What would you call that church?
I would call that church, I'm not too sure, but it wouldn't be a good name.
You could call it Planet Keepers.
Yeah, Planet Keepers. Yeah. The Abandoned.
The Abandoned. Left Behind.
Yeah. The Orphans. Something like that. Just something of that nature, really.
Yeah. Okay,
I don't know what I'd do. I don't know.
Okay, I know that. Okay, let's just dispel the myth. We're not live right now.
No.
But I will go and look at the comments. I want to know if you'd press the button. If you're watching this now, right?
Yeah.
Put into the comments, I'd press that button right now. Or I wouldn't push it right now. And I think like don't give me some sort of moral virtuistic kind of like I wouldn't press it because there's more people to reach. I want to know about your own real like is all of your eggs in that basket? Just like because sometimes I say that Jesus come back now, but like I think how bad does it have to get for me to actually want to press that button?
Yeah.
And I don't know. It's difficult, man.
And that's where I think I feel like I've maybe lost something in my faith. Like not lost my faith, but I've lost an elephant. I've lost an elephant of my faith. I've lost an element of expectancy.
Yeah.
That would change how I view certain things.
Okay.
Like there's no, like I don't feel a massive urgency, which I think when I read the Bible, it seems like the early church had not like a give up everything. We're just going to go gung ho to do this because we're probably going to be going back to heaven tomorrow. But there was definitely a sense of urgency about what they're kind of doing and how they were engaging society and the world. And I was thinking about this going, if you knew that tomorrow Christ was returning, if you 100% knew that, what would you do different today if you knew that? And I feel like that's what I've lost because I'm not expecting him to come tomorrow. So my today isn't affected by this idea of Christ returning. Yet one of the central pivots for the early church fathers in creating protections for the faith was this idea of Christ is coming back. He's returning. And there was something in that they were going, this is super important for us to hold on.
Paul, I think it's in Corinthians. I'm almost certain it's in Corinthians. Paul talks about like if he's not coming back, if there is no final resurrection, if there is no coming back, then he's like this whole thing's a sham. Like so his belief in it was such that like not only that he says eat and drink and be merry because tomorrow we die. Like ultimately, if we're only living for the extent of the temporary, the whole thing's pointless, right? So he wasn't even speaking about the belief in Jesus coming back. He was talking about this idea, like if it doesn't affect the way that we see the world and the way that we behave and the way that we think. So like you're saying this, you think there's been a shift in you. So at some point, was there ever a version of Richard that would have pressed the button?
Yeah.
Or are you just giving yourself more credit than you're due?
No. So I think that when I first became a Christian, early doors Christian, and I heard about, so I grew up in a Baptist church, and in the Baptist church, they would preach Christ is coming back. I'm not too sure it was a central belief to what we held to in any way, but they would talk about it. And I remember when I first became a Christian, I was like, that's cool. That's cool. Sorry, my kid's asking if they can watch TV. Yep, Christ is coming back. You go watch some television. Be ready. So it feels like early doors, but probably really quickly that was lost somehow. I don't know what it was that made me move to all I know is when I look now, I go, even as I'm prepping the message and I'm thinking about this, I'm still battling internally going, but is he coming back? Do I really think he's coming back tomorrow? I don't. And I don't know what to do about it, but I know that I feel I've lost an expectancy that I need.
Yeah. Do you think it's because you just enjoy what the world has to offer too much? Is it because your life's too good? Your life's too good?
It could be. No, I don't want to say that, because then the next thing my life goes down the toilet and Jesus goes, you see, even with your rubbish, let's not push those buttons. Let's not see what happens.
Full of Job on you.
Yeah. But what I do think is that, what do I think? I'm not even too sure if it's generating around this idea that my life's too good. I just think it's a overarching, it's not going to happen.
Okay. If it's because the worst case scenario is you're too comfortable, and when I say you,
yeah.
You're too comfortable. You've got it too cushy.
Right? I'm not sure we are too comfortable.
Life's too sweet. Life's too. It's too easy being a Christian, right? That's the worst case scenario.
Yeah.
Do you think, or the best case scenario is that it's a deficit in modern Western church to such an extent now that it's not that it's resisted, it's that it's forgotten. It's almost like it's not a real thing. It's just
so I had this thought. I probably think the latter. I think it's become lip service. It's the same as the Trinity. We all say we believe in one God, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. But in practice, I think right now in contemporary Western church, we only believe in the Holy Spirit, really. Okay. Jesus is a little salvific thing that he does, saves us, and then that's pretty much Jesus good for. And we're just running with the Holy Spirit. And so we miss out on God the Father, who treats us as his children. We miss out on Jesus, who is sacrificing and kind of doing all of these amazing things. And I think it's a little bit like that in Western church.
I like how you couldn't quite define what Jesus does.
I know. It's just a little bit like, those things. Those things he does. Those little bits and pieces.
That was almost like a Trumpism there. That was a nice thing.
Yeah.
Loads of great things.
He's great. He's great. He's going to make heaven great again. And so, and I feel like that it's exactly the same thing when it comes to Christ coming again. It becomes just an affirmation that we make, but the practical implication of it in our lives doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Mostly because I think that it pushes us to an urgency. It pushes us to live our lives in a different way.
Yeah.
It's interesting because Paul's pursuing the things of God that God is asking him to do. He's not pursuing the benefits that may come from those things.
Yeah.
Kind of like, I'm probably not going to get the benefits because Christ will probably come again before I get the benefit of it. But I need to go after what God's asking me to do. Where now I think we're pursuing the benefits and, there's no urgencies of just God is saying, do this. So, I think that you, and I say you, I think all of us, we could end up with knowing God's asking us to do something and spend the next 20 years of our life not doing it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Without any kind of real, urgency around, I need to get on that. God's asking me to do that. I need to do it. But it just feels like a deficit, and it feels like a deficit across church.
Yeah.
And it even feels like a deficit that it affects everything. It affects how we give. It affects how we would serve.
Yeah.
I
remember being in a session, I think it was being taught by Paul Scanlon once, and he was talking about this. There was this almost fatalistic generation of Christians that post World War II that only ever spoke about the return of Christ. And he was saying that, suggesting that it was a negative, that actually they didn't build strength into structures and strategies that would bring health to the next generation of church, because they were basically just living for revival in their moment, or not revival, the return of Christ in their moment. Probably like that idea that temporary church structures or whatever.
Yeah.
But actually in building community, it was just like they weren't thinking about raising up the next generation of leaders because they were so convinced. Probably coming into wartime, I reckon, probably pre-boomers. And now, obviously, the pendulum swings the other way completely, where like we are, I think, as a church, a lot more future conscious, thinking about we talk a lot, like in charismatic circles, about legacy, leaving legacy. We talk a lot more about legacy, don't we? About what we leave and about building an inheritance and the way our society is structured, pensions and investments, all these things that help you with end of life kind of supply. And it's almost the opposite. So like, how do we realign and reorient our lives towards this idea that Jesus is coming back?
Great question. Oh, we're out of time. Yeah. I think that I don't know how we do it. I think that we have to somehow re-grab hold of the belief. In my head, like over the past while, I've been going, okay, so if I knew 100% Jesus was coming back tomorrow, everything becomes affected by that thought.
Yeah.
Oh, broken relationships. I need to repair that. I just need to, because I don't want to not have that repaired before Christ comes back. How you're utilizing your finances. Oh, I need to get this thing sorted out.
Yeah.
You know, like I was thinking about it, like church leaders, what arguments would you go into if this was your last day of being a church leader before Christ comes back? What would be the things where you'd put everyone into a room and go, guys, this has got to end. This is rubbish because Jesus is coming tomorrow and we can't and it becomes this interesting thought because all of a sudden I feel like I'm aligning to, oh, wow. So these battles kind of are irrelevant. These things are kind of central. These issues in my life I'd really deal with. These issues doesn't feel like it's that important. But when you remove the urgency out of that, we'll kind of get there. And so I don't know what the silver bullet is, but I know that somehow, like I partly I think where I'm landing is going, we have to somehow recapture thinking Christians. Like we have to recapture it. Christianity should become a felt and thought faith. It has to be.
Yeah.
And if we don't have that, I feel like we're lost. And right now, that's what I think is we no longer think at these levels. I was talking with some guys the other day and we were talking about some stuff and it was like getting quite intense. And I remember walking away and going, when did we stop thinking that we should move from milk to meat as Christians?
Yeah.
When did we become content with milk as if the milk is the meat? Like it's a weird thing.
Yeah.
But, it's all like, we're like encouraged through the New Testament, grow up, stop just eating on the easy stuff, really begin to pour over the hard stuff. And I think that is pouring over bigger doctrinal theological issues, really wrestling it through, really landing it and really holding to it in faith and letting it start to form how we operate, how we live. And I feel like all of that we've somehow, I don't know where, but I feel like we've lost it. But I'm not too sure where we've lost it. But now I feel like we've lost it. And it's kind of like hard.
I think I agree. I think there's been a shift in church culture that is more self-serving and more to do with, how do I say it? Like Phil Pringle calls it churchianity rather than Christianity, where you disciple people to the church rather than Christ. And I think we had that smell the coffee moment coming in. Well, in COVID, you're kind of like, oh man, did we move people more to the church and affection for the church? So that when church is taken away in terms of a Sunday service, the whole thing is under fire and under threat.
Yeah.
And I guess that partnered with this idea that people don't like the idea of absolute truths. They don't like the idea that there is some no nuanced, exacting parameter which speaks to the nature of God and the nature of life and humanity. That doctrine like if you were doing this series, I was thinking you could call the series "Making Doctrine Great Again." Like this idea of the reassertion and the reassemblance of fundamental beliefs that impact all of our decision making and the way we raise our kids and the way we save our money or spend our money. And I think obviously the return of Christ speaks to that. But the challenge with the return of Christ over all the other doctrinal components, like the incarnation of Christ or the Trinity, is it speaks more. How do I say it's glorious, obviously, and I have to say that, but it's also like there's a depressing component to it.
I agree. It's super depressing.
It's weird, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because the return of Christ is glorious and it's amazing and it's like the culmination of all things, but at the same time, it means it's the end of everything as we know it.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I just think it's a challenging one to kind of.
I think and it's fascinating. So we got into this weird conversation. I was speaking to because obviously Kevin Sissons did the preach on the return of Christ, and they wanted to talk about it at the small group, and I was like, oh, sweet. I get to ask some questions to prep up for my sermon. It's going to be helpful. And what I found interesting when guys were talking about it, and amongst my small group, there wasn't anybody who believed Christ would return in their lifetime.
Wow.
None of us believed it. So I thought, yeah, that tracks with where I'm at and how I think. But it began to raise all these questions about the nature of heaven. What will heaven be like? And people began to go, well, I don't believe in heaven. Things will be like this. And it's so weird. You affirm this one thing, and all of a sudden there was a whole other line of thinking that started to open up that I was like, that probably needs to be spoken into. And that now needs to be spoken into. That should probably be spoken into. It began to raise questions.
The expression of a doctrine actually exposed all the deficit and dysfunction in their outlook.
In some of the thinking, and you go, but it feels to me like that should be the nature of Christians who are wrestling and thinking these things through. And at some point, we've just put our brain on hold in church. It doesn't make sense. So I think people would have. It's really interesting. I think people would have more intense views around things like abortion than they would around the return of Christ. I go, in the run of if Jesus was coming back tomorrow, like I know which one I'd want to understand better.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? And I feel like, wow, okay. At what point did we go, theology, not that important, philosophical, sociological issues, hugely important. And how, as church, do we readdress that? And it's not like I knew during the Trinity preach, nobody was going to disagree with what I was saying. It's hard pressed. And yet I could feel when I was saying to guys, if you don't agree with what I'm saying, you're wrong. I don't know what else to tell you. You're wrong. Like, this is who God says he is. There's no other way around it. If you don't think this, I don't think you worship the God of the Bible. And that's a highly offensive thing to say.
Yeah.
But also I feel like it draws a line where I go, well, it's where it's at. It's weird.
It flies in the face of that late 90s platitude of come and belong. You don't have to believe what we believe to belong here. And we spoke about that briefly last week on Fire Mountain.
Yeah.
It just flies in the face of that philosophy and that missional approach, doesn't it? Which is we lower the bar and we turn down the volume of our fundamental ideas in order to be inclusive and accommodate nuance and ambiguity, because we think that brings missional strength to us, because actually we're willing to meet you where you're at.
Yeah.
Whereas at the early church, it wasn't like that. It was like, when I say early church, I mean this, when the church begins to be creeded up and orthodox doctrine begins to be laid down. It's a exclusive, like you say, if you don't believe this, you're not in. Like, you're just not in.
That's crazy. Yeah, I think that it's all. I mean, having just delved into these two, and I think that there are core theological issues you could really jump headfirst into. But I kind of am beginning to realize. So it's really interesting because I think what you affirm about creation has a massive impact on how you see the rest of the Bible.
Okay.
So there has to be something that's wrestled through that theologically for us.
Yeah.
Because if my view of creation begins to affect my view of the rest of Scripture, so it's really interesting because when you look into the New Testament, when they start expounding the gospel story, a lot of times those early writers are jumping to creation as their beginning.
Yeah.
So they're going, here's the gospel, and you want to understand it, here's the beginning. So what you think about the beginning now becomes extremely important to where you get to when you get to the end. And I think like those things for me, I'm like looking at them kind of going, we don't dwell on that anymore. And I understand why, because I think partly we want to be, and I want to be practical. I want to be able to say to people, Jesus can transform your life tomorrow. The Holy Spirit will empower you. Actually, you can be, God believes you can be better than what you are. He does. He's got a great future for you. And we want to preach those things, and not just because they sound good, because it's true. But I also know if I had to stack up my preaching 8 years at Sunny Hill, I think I could go really going to have a lot of practical help. And I'm not averse to preaching self-helpy type messages. I'm really not. So I think these would be a lot of self-help empowered through the Holy Spirit's really going to come in very low doctrine. And then I wonder if that was flipped, would people be further on? Would they be deeper in their faith? Yeah, I don't really know. And I mean, to be honest,
that's a great thought. Well, to be honest, this morning you preached, because this is live on Sunday night.
I know, so Sunday night, and it went really well. And I don't want to give it away. I don't want to give it away, so you should listen.
You don't want to give it away. But this morning we fired out Sunday Live at 10:30, and obviously you unpack this a little bit more, don't you? And I think you speak some of that to how do we reclaim that, or an anticipation of the return of Christ. And I think that'll be worth a watch, and I think that'll be really interesting, because the reason I find this interesting, where what you're bringing to the church is like, I feel like had I asked Phil, well, I did. I asked him to do something, and he didn't bring doctrine, and I would have put him in that. And so, obviously, some kind of weird. Maybe Jesus is coming back, because everything's weird at the moment. People are just doing things out of character, like preaching doctrine, when really.
But what will be the same is we're going to stick Adam Clark just standing on stage for my whole preach. I'm going to make him just stand there for the whole preach for no reason whatsoever.
Well, that's good. It's a great conversation, and
cool.
I look forward to listening. Can I just leave with some words of wisdom?
Yeah.
What episode are we on? Episode 47?
47, dude. 47. 2 more or 3 more.
3 more. Let's have a little Fire Mountain party, aren't we?
Yeah. For episode 50, I don't know what we should do, but it needs to be something.
It needs to be in person. It can't be like 200
it must be in person. It can't be this. It can't be. Well, I mean, being in your bedroom, it's been magical.
Do you like it?
I know what your wife feels like now. It's pretty harrowing. It's harrowing. I feel confronted. I feel a little bit vulnerable right now. So I'm really identifying with Louise in a deep way right now.
Well, I'm going to make my screen big, right? And I'm going to leave with a very profound thought, okay?
Hold on. You're saying make your screen big. I'm going to go solo layout.
Oh, no, dude. Well, make sure you come on after me, right?
Oh, is that too big? Was that too big? Hold on.
Get too overwhelming. So, Sunny Hill, I'm looking down the lens at you. Richard's going, but Jesus is returning. He's going back for his church, and for millennia, it's been debated and disagreed over as to what this is going to look like. What condition, what state will the world be in when he returns? At what point will he come? What prophecies have been fulfilled? What prophecies are still outstanding and waiting to be fulfilled? Is it going to be like meeting him in the air, as we've sung so many times at church? Or could it even be a rapture?
What? Did you get raptured to hell because you flipped upside down? Surely you would shoot up. I don't know why you went through the ground.
You're killing the moment. Safe broadcast. You're killing the moment, dude.
Yeah. Well, Dom's gone. Don't worry. Jesus is coming back. Fire Mountain 47 in the bag. We look forward to seeing you next week. Have a great rest of your evening. Bye.